The argument never happened out loud. It lived in the careful space between questions and answers, in the way visits were scheduled weeks in advance and never stayed long enough to disrupt anything. Henry Caldwell noticed it in the pauses, in the polite concern that hovered just slightly too close to practical matters. Papers were reviewed, forms were mentioned. Futures were considered in ways that quietly excluded the present. Nothing was said that could be challenged, yet everything was understood. His children came as they always had, with measured kindness and practiced attentiveness. They sat beside him, asked about his health, commented on the weather in Madison as winter crept closer. Their coats were always warm, their watches discreetly checked. Henry, who had spent a lifetime reading rooms and people, recognized the shape of obligation when it wore the mask of care. He did not resent it. Resentment required energy he no longer had. What remained was clarity. Time, for Henry, had begun to feel less like a line and more like a narrowing corridor. Days no longer opened outward. They folded inward, one into the next, marked by medication schedules and the slow movement of light across the window. Winter announced itself early that year. The air sharpened. Leaves disappeared from the trees outside the nursing home, leaving branches exposed and unadorned, much like the truths Henry carried quietly within himself. There was a particular loneliness in being surrounded by routine. Meals arrived on time. Beds were made. Nurses passed with gentle efficiency. Everything functioned as it should, and yet something essential remained untouched. Henry felt it most acutely after visits ended, when the room returned to stillness and the weight of what had not been said settled back into place. He understood then that presence could be physical without being emotional, that love could exist in theory, while absence did the real work. He did not blame his children for wanting security. Wanting was human. Planning was sensible. What unsettled him was the realization that not everyone stayed for the same reasons. Some remained because they were bound by duty or expectation. Others stayed because leaving never occurred to them. The difference revealed itself slowly, like frost forming along the edges of a window, unnoticed until it was already there. Henry had lived long enough to know that time reveals priorities more honestly than words ever could. As winter drew closer, and his body responded with increasing reluctance to each new morning, he became aware of how little time was left to misunderstand the world. The days no longer asked much of him. And in return, he began asking something of them. He started paying attention to who remained when nothing was required. If this story asks anything of you, it is not urgency. It does not ask for judgment or conclusions. It simply invites you to stay for a while, to sit with Henry in the quiet spaces where meaning gathers slowly. To notice what remains when noise fades and intentions reveal themselves through repetition. Because it is here, within these walls and measured hours, that Henry has come to understand something essential. This nursing home is no longer a temporary stop along the way. It is where his life now unfolds. And here, time does not rush forward. It waits. Life inside the nursing home moved at a pace that did not ask permission from the outside world. Days began before Henry Caldwell felt ready for them, and ended without ceremony, folding into one another with quiet consistency. Morning light slipped through the narrow window beside his bed, pale and thin, filtered by the heavy sky of a Madison winter preparing to arrive. The building itself seemed to breathe slowly, its hallways carrying the soft sounds of carts rolling, distant televisions, and the occasional murmur of footsteps that never hurried. Henry's mornings followed a pattern that had become both comfort and confinement. He woke before his body wanted to, waited for stiffness to loosen its grip, and sat at the edge of the bed until balance returned. There was a careful order to everything now. Shoes placed just so, a sweater chosen more for warmth than appearance. A pause by the window before breakfast, where he would watch the trees across the street shed the last of their leaves, each one falling without resistance. These small rituals gave shape to time, even as time itself felt increasingly formless. Aging had arrived in Henry quietly, without a single defining moment. It announced itself in subtleties. The way his hands shook slightly when lifting a cup, the effort required to rise from a chair, the fatigue that lingered long after rest. His reflection had grown unfamiliar, not because it was unrecognizable, but because it carried the weight of years he no longer felt inside. The body moved forward, steadily and without apology, even as the mind lingered in places it could no longer reach. The nursing home was not unkind. It was clean, efficient, and carefully managed. Walls were painted in calming tones meant to suggest warmth. Windows were large, though the light that entered them was often muted by clouds. Outside, Madison transitioned slowly from autumn into winter. The air sharpened. The streets grew quieter. Snow threatened but had not yet fallen, as if the season itself were hesitating. Inside, the building remained unchanged, insulated from weather, from urgency, from anything resembling surprise. Michael and Rebecca visited as scheduled, their presence predictable enough to be circled on a calendar. They arrived with coats still holding the cold, smiles already prepared. They asked the right questions, listened with the appropriate expressions, and stayed long enough to reassure themselves they had done what was expected. Henry received them with courtesy and restraint, offering no complaints, no demands. He had learned long ago that politeness was often mistaken for peace. Their visits carried a particular kind of distance, one that did not come from cruelty but from careful avoidance. Conversations moved safely around logistics, health updates, and neutral observations. There was affection, certainly, but it felt preserved rather than alive, like something stored away for special occasions. When they left, the room did not feel emptier. It felt unchanged, as if their presence had passed through without leaving a mark. What remained after they were gone was the routine, uninterrupted and patient. Meals arrived, medications were administered. The day continued as it always did. Henry found himself noticing how little his rhythm shifted when his children came and went. Their visits punctuated time without altering it, like markers placed along a road he was already traveling alone. And slowly, without any conscious decision, Henry began to understand something that unsettled him more than loneliness ever had. The most meaningful presence in his days did not announce itself with scheduled visits or familiar names. It appeared elsewhere, quietly, in ways he had not yet fully recognized. The visits arrived like clockwork, spaced neatly across the calendar, predictable enough to dull anticipation before it could form. Henry Caldwell learned not to look forward to them, not because he did not love his children, but because expectation only sharpened disappointment. Michael and Rebecca came with intention, coats brushed clean of snow, expressions calibrated to concern. They sat close enough to suggest intimacy, yet something invisible always remained between them, a careful distance no one acknowledged. Their conversations followed familiar paths. Health updates were exchanged, medication schedules noted, small changes documented with attentive nods. Practical matters hovered gently at the edges of every moment, never forceful, never overt. Henry recognized the pattern. Questions that circled around decisions rather than memories, around futures rather than the present. It was a way of engaging without entering, of being involved without being vulnerable. He answered calmly, offering clarity where it was requested, withholding nothing yet giving very little of himself. Inside, Henry understood more than he allowed to show. Age had stripped him of many illusions, leaving behind a quiet discernment that felt almost clinical. He saw how priorities revealed themselves through repetition, how concern leaned subtly toward permanence and outcomes. There was no malice in it. His children were practical people, shaped by lives that demanded planning and foresight. Still, the awareness settled heavily in his chest. They were preparing for a future that did not include his presence, only its consequences. Emotional restraint became a form of protection. Henry had learned that expressing need invited discomfort, and discomfort shortened visits. So he spoke carefully, smiled when appropriate, and kept his reflections to himself. He did not speak of loneliness. He did not ask for more time. He had no desire to burden them with the weight of what he was slowly releasing. Silence, in this way, became an offering, a way of preserving peace, even if it cost him intimacy. The unspoken subject lingered in the room like a draft from a cracked window. Inheritance was never named, yet it shaped the contours of each interaction. Documents were mentioned in passing. Long-term arrangements were reviewed with gentle urgency. Henry listened, aware that his life had begun to be measured in assets and timelines rather than days and moments. It was not betrayal that hurt him. It was the reduction, the quiet transformation of a father into a responsibility. Between visits, time expanded. Days stretched wide and unmarked, filled with routines that asked nothing of him beyond endurance. The calendar pages turned slowly, each one carrying the memory of a visit already past, and the knowledge of the next one too far away to matter. Henry noticed how quickly his children returned to their lives, how easily he faded back into the background once obligation had been fulfilled. Their absence did not arrive abruptly. It settled gradually, like dust. The loneliness that followed each departure was not sharp. It was soft, persistent, and strangely familiar. Henry would sit in his chair by the window long after the door had closed, watching the light shift across the floor. Nothing in the room changed, yet everything felt slightly more distant. He did not feel abandoned. He felt peripheral, as though he had become a detail rather than a center. What troubled him most was how invisible his loneliness seemed to be. His children did not notice the way his gaze lingered after they left, or how his posture softened into fatigue once politeness was no longer required. They did not see the quiet surrender that followed their footsteps down the hall. And slowly, Henry began to realize that someone else did notice these things. Someone whose presence had not been scheduled, whose care did not depend on obligation. Margaret Lewis entered Henry Caldwell's days without ceremony. No announcement preceded her, no defining moment marked her arrival. She was simply there one morning, adjusting the curtain so the light wouldn't fall directly into his eyes, humming something soft and unrecognizable under her breath. People later would call her Maggie, because it felt warmer, because it matched the way she spoke and moved, gently, as if every action carried weight. Maggie's care went beyond what was written on charts. She noticed when Henry's hands trembled more than usual and warmed them between her palms before checking his pulse. She remembered how he liked his tea, not too hot, never sweet, and how he paused before the first sip, as if bracing himself for the day. She spoke to him while she worked, not to fill silence, but to share it. Small observations, bits of weather, stories about her commute. Nothing urgent, nothing performative. What set Maggie apart was not devotion, but presence. She lingered. When her shift allowed, she sat for a moment longer than necessary, asking questions that did not lead anywhere practical. She asked about the photograph on his dresser, the one of Henry and his late wife standing beside a lake. She listened without interrupting, without steering the conversation toward something easier. When Henry spoke, she stayed with his words, even when they grew quiet. Over time, shared moments accumulated, the kind that do not announce themselves as important until much later. Maggie brought Henry a small cupcake on his birthday, a single candle flickering bravely in the dim room. She marked holidays with modest gestures, a paper snowflake taped to the window, a card with handwriting slightly slanted to the right. She celebrated not because the dates demanded it, but because she knew no one else would. These rituals stitched meaning into days that might otherwise have dissolved into one another. Henry felt it slowly, the way warmth returns to cold fingers. Not all at once, but enough to be noticed. With Maggie, he did not need to explain his silences. She recognized when fatigue replaced conversation, when company was needed without words. She became an emotional anchor, steady and unobtrusive, grounding him to the present. In her presence, Henry was not a task to be completed or a life to be managed. He was simply a man being met where he was. Maggie saw Henry's isolation clearly. She noticed how his children's visits ended with brisk goodbyes, how the room seemed larger afterward. She watched him fold into himself, reclaiming stillness once politeness was no longer required. She did not judge Michael or Rebecca. Judgment would have served no purpose. Instead, she absorbed what they left behind, the quiet weight, the absence that lingered like an echo. To Maggie, companionship was not an extra. It was a form of care as essential as medication. She believed that attention could heal what treatment could not. That being seen mattered, especially when time was no longer abundant. And so she stayed. Not always physically, but emotionally, holding space for Henry's days, making them feel inhabited. Henry never asked for this devotion. That was perhaps why it mattered so much. He accepted it cautiously at first, wary of needing something that might disappear. But Maggie's consistency softened that fear. She returned each morning with the same warmth, the same attentiveness, as if care were not an obligation, but a choice she made anew every day. As winter deepened outside, and the world beyond the windows grew quieter, something subtle shifted inside Henry. His days began to feel shaped rather than endured. And Maggie, watching him from the doorway one afternoon, made a small, quiet decision. One that did not involve paperwork or permission, but would soon change the shape of Henry's days in ways neither of them could yet name. The cat arrived on a day that felt no different from the others. Gray light pressed against the windows, winter settling deeper into Madison, the nursing home humming with its usual restrained quiet. Maggie appeared at Henry's door with something small and dark tucked inside her coat, as if she were carrying a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. Henry noticed the movement before he understood it. 2 yellow eyes blinked up at him, unafraid, observant. The cat was small, black as soot, its fur uneven in places, as though life had already tested it and found it stubborn. It did not meow. It did not struggle. It simply existed, calm and alert, a presence rather than a request. Henry hesitated. His first instinct was resistance, not to the cat, but to attachment itself. He had learned, slowly and painfully, that everything which stayed eventually left. He worried about the responsibility, about becoming needed in a way he could not promise to sustain. He worried about loving something fragile when his own body felt increasingly unreliable. So he said nothing at first, only watched as the cat was placed gently on the chair by the window. The cat did not rush toward him. It did not curl into his lap or demand attention. It inspected the room with quiet authority, tail low, movements deliberate. It paused near the heater, then the window, then settled on the rug, as if it had already decided this place would suffice. Its indifference disarmed Henry. There was no performance in the cat's behavior, no pleading, no gratitude, no expectation. When Maggie asked if he would like to name it, Henry almost declined. Names made things real. Names made loss sharper, but something in the stillness of the room, in the way the cat lay there like a piece of night fallen indoors, made him speak before he could reconsider. "Ash," he said softly. The word felt appropriate, something shaped by fire, by what remains after burning. The cat did not respond, which felt exactly right. Ash moved through Henry's days like a shadow, present, unobtrusive, quietly observing. Sometimes the cat sat near him, sometimes across the room, sometimes not at all. There were no rules. Ash accepted food when offered, warmth when convenient, affection when it suited him. He did not require explanation or apology. In that freedom, Henry found relief. He could care without being consumed. He could share space without fear of failing. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Henry changed. He spoke more, not to Ash, but because the silence no longer pressed so heavily. He noticed small things again. The way snow muted sound outside. The subtle creak of the building settling at night. Ash became part of the room's rhythm, a quiet punctuation in the long sentences of Henry's days. What surprised Henry most was how little the cat asked of him. There was companionship without obligation, closeness without dependence. Ash did not need Henry to be strong or hopeful or enduring. He only needed space. Something Henry had in abundance. In giving that space, Henry felt something inside him loosen, as if grief had found a place to rest. Maggie watched this transformation with gentle satisfaction. She never commented on it directly. She understood that what mattered most did not need explanation. She saw Henry's posture change, his gaze soften. She saw Ash curl near his feet during long afternoons, both of them sharing warmth without ceremony. Winter continued its quiet advance. Snow piled higher. Days shortened, and in the company of a small black cat who expected nothing and offered everything simply by staying, Henry began to sense something else as well. An awareness settling in his bones, as steady and inevitable as the cold outside. Time, he understood now, was no longer abundant. And as Ash slept nearby, breathing slow and even, Henry began to reckon with how little of it remained, and how carefully it should be spent. By the time winter fully claimed Madison, Henry's body began to reveal what he had long kept quiet. It was not one sudden collapse, but a collection of small betrayals. Hands that trembled when lifting a cup, breath that shortened after walks that used to feel effortless, mornings that asked more of him than he could comfortably give. The nursing home adjusted around him with practiced efficiency, but Henry felt the narrowing all the same. His world was growing smaller, and his body was the first to admit it. Outside, the city disappeared beneath snow. Trees stood stripped and patient, streets softened into silence. The light that filtered through Henry's window was pale and brief, lingering only long enough to remind him of what was missing. Winter had a way of clarifying things, not just the air, but the truth. There were no distractions now, no illusions of time stretching endlessly forward. Everything moved slower, heavier, closer to stillness. Henry found himself thinking often about his life, not in grand scenes, but in fragments. A younger version of himself laughing without restraint, the long years of work that blurred together, the quiet pride of providing, the belief that duty alone could build love. He thought of Michael and Rebecca, of how carefully they spoke, how efficiently they cared. They fulfilled their roles well. But Henry understood now that duty and love were not the same thing, and that one could exist fully without the other. Ash, meanwhile, remained unchanged. The small black cat moved through the room with the same calm independence, settling near Henry during long afternoons, slipping away when he pleased. Ash did not mark time. He did not count days or anticipate endings. His presence was a steady now, a reminder that companionship did not need to be loud to be real. Henry found comfort in that constancy, in being seen without being evaluated. Maggie noticed the changes before Henry ever spoke of them. She adjusted his routines gently, never making his decline feel like an announcement. She sat longer during her shifts, listened without interruption, remembered details others forgot. Sometimes she brought small comforts, warm soup, a favorite song played quietly from her phone, a shared smile on a difficult day. She did not offer reassurances she could not promise. Instead, she offered presence, which felt more honest. As Henry's strength waned, his thoughts sharpened. There were unfinished matters pressing against him now, not with panic, but with clarity. He began to understand that what frightened him most was not dying, but being misunderstood after he was gone. He did not want his life reduced to numbers or assumptions. He did not want love mistaken for obligation, or care mistaken for convenience. Late one evening, as snow fell thickly outside and Ash slept curled nearby, Henry stared at the ceiling and felt something settle into certainty. How he lived had mattered, yes. But so would what he left behind. Not just possessions, but intention, meaning, truth. And in that quiet room, with winter holding the world still, Henry realized that the final act of his life would be choosing what, and who, truly carried his love forward. There are moments when life grows so quiet that choices begin to speak for themselves. For Henry, that quiet arrived not as revelation, but as accumulation, the slow stacking of days that revealed who remained when nothing was required of them. Lying awake in the early hours, the nursing home hushed around him. He found himself thinking not about what he owned, but about what had been given. Time, attention, care offered, without negotiation. These were the true measures of a life, he realized, and they weighed heavier now than any possession ever had. Michael and Rebecca continued their visits, predictable as calendar squares. They sat at his bedside with careful smiles, asked polite questions, mentioned documents and plans with a tone that suggested efficiency, not cruelty. They were not unkind, and perhaps that was what made the distance harder to name. Henry listened, nodded, answered when required. He had stopped waiting for something more from them. Waiting, he had learned, was a form of hope he could no longer afford. What he noticed instead were the absences between those visits, the long stretches where days passed without family voices, without inquiry, without concern beyond obligation. And then there was Maggie, filling those spaces without ever announcing herself. She arrived early, stayed late, remembered how he liked his tea, which stories he had already told. She spoke to him as if his life still extended forward, even as she understood its limits. Her care carried no expectation of reward. It simply existed. Ash, too, became part of Henry's quiet accounting. The small black cat asked nothing of him. No promises, no explanations. Ash came and went, settled near Henry when warmth was needed, disappeared when it was not. In that freedom, Henry found something sacred. Presence without demand. Love without claim. Ash did not cling to Henry's dwindling days. He shared them. And that, Henry realized, was the purest form of companionship he had known. The idea of legacy crept in gently. Henry did not frame it as a final judgment, nor as revenge. There was no bitterness left in him, only precision. He wanted his life to conclude the way it had quietly been lived, with intention, with honesty. He did not wish to punish his children, nor to make a statement that would echo with drama. He wanted to leave behind a truth that matched the reality of his final years. So he made his preparations quietly. A conversation here, a document signed there. No announcements, no confrontations. He understood that explanations often complicated what clarity had already resolved. His hands shook as he wrote, but his mind remained steady. Each choice felt less like a decision and more like an acknowledgement, a recognition of what had already been proven through time. When Maggie noticed the legal envelope one afternoon, she did not ask questions. She only squeezed his hand gently and smiled, as if she understood without needing words. Ash slept nearby, tail flicking lazily, unaware of the weight being settled in that room. Henry felt a strange lightness then, not relief exactly, but alignment. The pieces of his life, scattered and uneven, had finally arranged themselves into something honest. As winter pressed on, and Henry's strength thinned, there was no urgency left in him. He had done what he needed to do, The rest would unfold without his guidance now. And somewhere deep within, he sensed it, the ending drawing nearer, not with spectacle, but with certainty. The kind that does not ask permission, the kind that arrives when everything that needed choosing has already been chosen. Henry's final days did not arrive with alarms or whispered urgency. They came softly, like snow settling overnight, changing the shape of the world without making a sound. His breathing grew shallower, his words fewer, but his presence did not diminish. He spent long hours by the window, watching Madison wrapped in winter light. Ash curled nearby like a quiet punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. Maggie sat with him often, sometimes speaking, sometimes not. There was nothing left to explain. Everything important had already been said through consistency. When the end came, it was gentle. Henry slept, and then he didn't wake. No struggle, no fear. The room held him the way it always had, carefully, respectfully. Maggie cried afterward, the kind of tears that come not from shock, but from love finally given permission to break. Ash remained still, eyes open, present in a way that felt ancient and knowing. Outside, the snow continued its patient fall, indifferent and beautiful. The reading of the will took place weeks later in a small neutral room that smelled faintly of paper and dust. Michael and Rebecca sat side by side, composed, expectant. Their grief, if it existed, wore the shape of restraint. Maggie arrived quietly, unsure why she had been asked to attend at all. Ash did not come, but his absence lingered, felt more than noticed. The lawyer spoke calmly, methodically, as if this were any other case. Henry's name echoed in the room, tethering them briefly to the man he had been. Then the details unfolded. Specific, intentional, unmistakable. The house, the savings, the accounts Michael and Rebecca had already assumed would be theirs. None of it went where they expected. Silence followed the revelation. A thick, stunned quiet. Michael's jaw tightened. Rebecca stared down at her hands, as if rereading the words there might change them. No one spoke. There was no outrage, no immediate protest. Just the slow realization that the narrative they had prepared for had quietly dissolved. Then Maggie's name was read. She shook her head before the lawyer finished, as if refusing the sentence itself. Disbelief crossed her face, followed by something far heavier. Grief, yes, but also the terrible tenderness of being seen. Henry had not repaid her. He had recognized her. He had measured love the same way she had given it, without demand. Tears slid down her cheeks, unguarded and honest, and no one in the room could mistake their meaning. And then there was Ash. The lawyer explained it carefully. A trust. Provisions for care, medical attention, freedom. Maggie would oversee it, not as owner, but as guardian. Ash's life would continue, warm, fed, unclaimed, just as Henry had wanted. The room absorbed this detail last, slowly, as if the truth needed time to land. The cat had been more than company. He had been witness. When it was over, no one lingered. Michael and Rebecca left without words, their inheritance replaced by understanding they had not prepared for. Maggie stayed seated for a long time after, hands folded, breathing through the weight of it all. She did not feel triumphant. She felt entrusted. That evening, she brought Ash home with her. He stepped into the new space cautiously, tail low, eyes alert. Nothing had been promised to him, only the continuation of choice. Maggie placed his bowl down, then sat on the floor, letting him decide the distance. When he settled nearby, not touching but close enough, she smiled through fresh tears. What remained after Henry was not conflict, nor resentment, nor even resolution. It was meaning. A life clarified not by what it accumulated, but by what it honored. And in that quiet truth, carried forward by a woman who stayed and a cat who never asked, Henry Caldwell endured. Life after Henry's passing did not announce itself as a new chapter. It arrived quietly, the way most real continuations do. The nursing home returned to its rhythm. Medication carts humming down the halls, televisions murmuring to no one in particular, windows fogging gently against the cold. Henry's room was cleaned, reassigned, absorbed back into the building's long memory. Only Maggie noticed the absence in small, precise ways. The chair by the window now empty, the hour in the afternoon that felt slightly unmoored. Ash came home with her, not as an inheritance, but as a responsibility that felt strangely mutual. He explored her apartment slowly, carefully, as if mapping safety before accepting it. Maggie did not rush him. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, that presence could not be forced. Some nights he slept near her feet. Other nights he chose the window, watching the world as Henry once had. Either way, he stayed, or left, or returned, always on his own terms. At work, Maggie continued as she always had. She cared for others with the same quiet devotion, celebrating birthdays that families missed, holding hands when words failed, remembering preferences no chart could capture. Henry was gone, but what he had seen in her remained visible, almost amplified. She carried him forward not in stories told aloud, but in the way she paused, listened, stayed. Michael and Rebecca faded into the background of her thoughts. Not out of bitterness, but because they no longer mattered to the shape of the story. They had been present in name, in blood, in expectation. But family, Maggie had learned, was something else entirely. It was defined by who noticed when days blurred together, who returned, who did not measure love by outcome. Ash became a quiet constant in her evenings. He did not replace anything. He did not heal her grief or soften its edges. He simply existed alongside it. In that coexistence, Maggie found a surprising peace, not the kind that celebrates, but the kind that settles. The kind that allows sorrow and gratitude to share the same space without conflict. Henry's life did not end with a lesson carved in stone. It ended with continuity, with care extending beyond the moment of breath, with choices that spoke when he no longer could. What he left behind was not wealth redistributed, but meaning clarified. And perhaps that is why stories like this linger, because somewhere, tonight, someone is sitting quietly with a warm cup in their hands, feeling the ache of something unnamed. And maybe they will recognize it here, in the spaces between words, in the gentle truth that love does not always arrive loudly, or stay forever, or belong to those who assume it will. Sometimes it simply stays. If you'd like to remain a little longer, Whiskory is here. More stories of quiet bonds, unseen loyalties, and the soft courage of presence are waiting, whenever you're ready.